Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Coaching to Flourish podcast. I am your host, John Andrew Williams. Today, I have Teresa Gallis, one of our trainers, a coach training EDU trainer. She went through, we've worked together through both the 1.0, the academic 1.0, and the 2.0. And I asked you to be a trainer, I don't know how many times before you said yes, very respectfully and very like, please, Teresa, it's always here. And when you said yes, I was so happy. And you get rave reviews from everybody. Oh, thank you. I got green drink delivered. This is, hold on, I just got to sip this.
Love it.
Wow.
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of green drinks, and my toddler eats a green smoothie every day. So yeah, I love it. That made my heart happy.
We have a hard time getting ours to get in that mode.
He liked it. He liked it until he discovered other foods. And then now sometimes we have to say, oh, you can have a little bite of strawberry if you have 2 bites of smoothie. So it takes a little negotiation, but he usually does it.
Entering the negotiation phase.
Yeah.
Sign of smarts. Welcome, Teresa. Welcome to the podcast. I know we have some heavy topics ahead, but they're in the space. And what I'm deeply grateful for is the conversations that I think we've been having in the past couple of weeks. And I feel that coaching has a role and a place to play in the forward progress. And that's my intention in this podcast, is to explore that. And I know you've had some personal tragedy and ideas around what that's like and how coaching, and also, being an expert coach. I'm just excited to learn how you've grown and how coaching has played a role in a catalyst, really, for where you are right now. So let's dive in. How are you?
I am well, thank you. I am sad. My heart hurts that so many of my relatives and friends and neighbors and coworkers do not feel safe and don't feel like they belong, because I know we've talked about this before, but I get so excited to hear other people's perspectives. And so, like you said, I think we're starting a conversation and creating the space for people to continue this conversation.
It's heavy, and it's heartbreaking, and there's a lot of work ahead of us. A lot of work. And I'm really thankful for Tony and the podcast on Tuesday. And I view it as just, this is not the end, but the beginning. Not even this is, we're going to have these conversations. And I do feel like something in our society has shifted. It won't, and I feel excited about that, and a lot of sadness and a lot of pain. I'm just going to dive right into it, Teresa. Just go straight to it, and we'll go for about a half hour, then we'll open up for Q&A. So you had a child who died, and as a parent, that's the parent's worst nightmare. Could you share, please, like the story, or as much as you would want to, and we'll just put it right there in the middle.
Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation to share, because I know grief is uncomfortable for people, and the people that we have most cherished since we lost our daughter have been the people who have said, please come in, sit, talk to us, show us pictures. And just the acknowledgement of, your child is a valid person. We want to remember her. We want to remember you. That means so much to us. And so I just appreciate so much even having the space to talk. So I am a professional certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. And I also have certifications in academic life coaching and in wellness life coaching, master's degree in teaching. I'm a coach trainer. my background has been working with busy women, mostly who are earning a degree through a non-traditional way. I've been doing curriculum development, academic advising, teaching, and most of the people I've coached were earning a degree while also working and or parenting. So I tend to be a very high achiever, go-getter, very self-motivated. And I had a lot going on. I got into coaching when I was going through grad school. I needed a flexible job. And I had several friends who worked for a company that offered academic life coaching, and they happened to be hiring right then. So I actually was working on grad school assignments all day Saturday. I'd set my alarm for 5:30 or 6 in the morning and work until midnight. And then Monday through Friday, I was student teaching from early in the morning until I'd get back home at 4:30 or 5. And then in the evening, I had 6 coaching calls. I coached clients all evening. It was until late at night. So I was so worn out and stretched very thin. And one thing I realized was partway through that first call at the end of my day, I would realize I'm standing on my chair and sometimes bouncing, kind of jumping on my chair, which I know is pretty dangerous, but it just told me coaching energizes me. This is the end of a day. I'm packing way too much into my life right now. And I'm so excited I can't sit still. So that's when I started thinking, maybe coaching should not be just the job that gets me through grad school. Maybe it should also be something I look into further. Maybe it's a better fit with my passion to equip people to experience breakthroughs as they realize what they're actually capable of achieving. So fast forward to, I'm juggling all of these things, coaching. I did graduate, and then I was coaching full time. And I had coached for 3 years and then found Coach Training EDU because I wanted more experience in academic life coaching. And I know I said this to you at the time, even though I had been coaching full time for 3 years before I started the 1.0 class, just the practical way you present the information and your practical feedback, I felt like light bulbs were going off all over my head. It wasn't just a single light bulb. It was like, oh, this is how coaching is supposed to be. So it was hands down the most practical application for moving me forward as a coach. So I was coaching full time. I loved it. I have the hardest time whenever anyone asks what I do because I just start talking and I can't stop because I love coaching so much. So then in 2016, I was pregnant with our first child. And even though it had been an uncomplicated pregnancy and the 20-week anatomy and physiology scan showed a baby in excellent health, I had experienced several years of extreme sleep deprivation and chronic insomnia, and just, I'm always putting too much on my plate. I'm a yes person. And so I thought, you know what? I am actually going to give myself a gift. I'm going to take a maternity leave. Probably it's only going to be 4 weeks or something. But to me, that'd be a big break. So I was like, I'm going to take a maternity leave and I'm going to focus on, they always say sleep when the baby sleeps. So I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to care if stuff needs to be done around the house. We can eat Cheerios every day. I don't know, but I'm just going to focus on sleeping and then also getting to know my daughter without the distractions of everything that I love. So that was my plan. But as it turned out, our daughter had several completely unexpected health complications, and every single one was extremely rare. So that necessitated, instead of the unmedicated birth center birth that we were planning, we had to have a C-section. And instead of me getting to have immediate skin-to-skin bonding with her, I didn't get to even see her until the next day. And I think that was a major miscommunication. It wasn't because there was anything life-threatening at the moment, but which is even more sad. But anyway, I didn't get to even hold her until she was 11 days old. And that was another miscommunication, I think, because we kept asking every time we'd come. And anyway, so long story short, she spent the first 6 weeks of her life in the neonatal intensive care unit, the NICU. And so it was the extreme other end of the spectrum from what we expected. We were thinking low intervention, just be at the birth center for a few hours, come home. And instead, it was just dominated by hospital, beeping lights, all the crazy intercoms. And even once she came home, then our lives were dominated by more doctor visits. And then right as we felt like maybe we were starting to figure stuff out, her pediatrician had said, good news, from now on, you can just treat her like a typically developing child. I mean, you know, the few issues that we thought were going on have been resolved. So everything's good. And we just thought, oh, praise the Lord, you know, this is all going to be a distant nightmare at some point. And then, well, I can just tell you the story. So one evening I was feeding her. I was sitting there holding her. She was very dramatic. She was hilarious because she would talk to us babbling while she was drinking her bottle. And you know, I always gesture with my hands, and she did too. So she'd be sitting here telling some dramatic story while she was drinking, and she was telling me, you know, just babbling while she's trying to eat. And then all of a sudden it seemed like something kind of hurt her. And I thought, oh, maybe she needs to burp, you know, and I tried that and that didn't work. And she started screaming. And I was like, what in the world? This is so strange. Anyway, we kept trying. Thankfully, both my husband and I were there at the time, and we were trying to figure out what was going on. Side note, this was actually during a hurricane. So our electricity was out. So we had a little camping lantern on the dresser. And my husband called the emergency room and said, we don't really know what's going on with our daughter, but she's making a weird cry, which sounds strange. But, you know, we were just like, I don't know, there's something wrong. And so the person on the other end was walking us through, you know, is she breathing okay? Are her lips blue? Yeah, everything was fine. She just looked completely relaxed, except she was doing this rhythmic cry. It was just like, ma, ma, ma. And we were like, what in the world is this? So anyway, pretty quickly, we both decided probably it's nothing, you know, probably as soon as we get to the emergency room, whatever is going on will be over and it'll be nothing, but it doesn't hurt to have them check her out, you know. So we grabbed everything and ran out the door through the flooding rain and right as we were leaving the hallway, she stopped crying, but I could still see from the light on the dresser, I could still see that her mouth was still doing the exact same movement. And so I said, oh no, she wore out her voice box because she was crying so much. But then as I crossed our door to go outside, she had stopped crying. And then I was buckling her into her car seat and her eyes were shut and I thought she was asleep. And then as I buckled her in, she did a big sigh. And I thought, okay, well, I'm glad that she has stopped crying and she's relaxed. You know, apparently she's sleeping now. And that was a relief anyway, because she hated the car seat. So I thought at least she's not going to be working herself up the whole way there. So we drove to the emergency room. They knew we were coming. We ran in and they called code blue, you know, have all hands on deck to see what was going on. And then they stepped out of the room after a few minutes and they said, well, it's time to say goodbye. And we said, wait, what are you talking about? And they said, she didn't have a pulse when you brought her in. So in hindsight, I realized that when I buckled her, I realized that she died as we were leaving our house. And when I buckled her into the car seat, that was the final breath. But so they said she didn't have a pulse. They'd worked on her for several minutes, and just based on the time of our call and when they were guessing she probably died, you know, they said at this point, even if we were able to get her back, it's been too long. It had been 45 minutes or so at that point. So it was, at that point, it was like 11:45 at night. And again, in the middle of a hurricane, it's all dark. And so we said, well, what do we do now? And they said, do you know what cemetery you're going to bury her in? And I was just thinking, you know, when we were picking out baby names, we actually didn't go tour the local cemeteries, you know, and purchase a plot. So no, we don't know. Neither of us is originally from here, you know. So we said, no, we don't know. And they said, okay, well, that's fine. Feel free to stay here as long as you want. And then when you're ready to go, you'll just leave her body here and then call us when you know where you want us to send it. And so obviously my husband and I were just in shock. And so we went back outside and there was valet parking, obviously, because we had just run in. And so the guy who brought our car said, why the long faces? Like he was laughing and trying to cheer us up. And we didn't even say anything. We were just like, I don't even know what just happened, you know? So we got in the car and drove home, and the little empty car seat was just in the back staring at us. And then we got home. It's probably close to midnight now. We walked in and the house was so quiet because you know, the electricity was not on, the air conditioning was not on, fans were not on. It was just complete silence. And everywhere we looked were baby things, you know, a pile of baby laundry on the couch, the half-eaten bottle sitting on the dresser. The next day we saw the little garbage bathroom trash was overflowing with diapers, and both of us cried. And it was a few days before we brought the diapers out to the garbage can, because we were like, those are her last diapers. We're never going to ever change her diaper again, you know? So we discovered several weeks later that she had a de novo, which means not hereditary, interstitial chromosome deletion, which means she had all the chromosomes. She didn't have any extra ones or any missing ones, but one of her chromosomes was missing a gigantic chunk. So, and it's very rare. And that was the reason for all of the complications she did have. But I just want to say, she had, even though she had a few things wrong, she still was hitting developmental milestones. And when the geneticist found out what was going on, she was shocked. And she said, how did she even survive to full term, let alone 3.5 months later? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, you're the geneticist. But she said there were only 5 other cases in medical literature of this deletion. And our daughter, Teresa, was missing 9 times as much. So it's like everyone else was missing this much and she was missing that much out of every single cell. So just the fact that she was able to survive at all was amazing, let alone be doing so well. But all that to say, no one knew that she had this issue until after she died, and we looked into it. So at first they were all shocked too when they found out, and they were like, oh my gosh, what happened? And her pediatrician combed through her records and said, I just want you to know there wasn't any indication that there was something wrong. And she had been seen by a couple different specialists in the couple weeks before. So he said, I don't want you to feel guilty. But anyway, so obviously I had been wanting to be a mom since I was really little, and a lot of my friends have kids right now who are in middle school, high school, college, and you know, I'm late getting started here, or feels late, you know. And so I finally unexpectedly got my baby, you know, and it just felt like this cruel joke that so soon she was gone. And the whole pregnancy and everything, no one had noticed anything wrong because it was at a cellular level. So there's not anything anyone could have predicted before, because she was moving and growing and everything was fine, except it wasn't fine because she was a ticking time bomb. So all that to say, I did not get a nap. I did not get a restful maternity leave. And well, when she died, I was just in so much shock, because I didn't know anyone else who had a child who died, or honestly, even children who were special needs. I mean, I didn't know anyone. I've never thought of maybe it wouldn't turn out well. And then also I had 17 friends or relatives who had babies literally the same week that she was born. So I was not on social media for the first year after she died, because it was just too painful to watch everyone else's kids happy and healthy and growing. So anyway, when she died, I just thought, I have no idea what just happened. I feel so, I don't know, I can't even make sense of it. Let me just go right back to work, because at least then I have structure and I know what I'm doing, and I love coaching, and my teammates were some of my close friends. And so I was like, let me just get right back to work. Well, lo and behold, a few months after I went back to work, the company that I worked for laid off all of the coaches, including me. So the combination of pushing myself way too hard for almost 2 decades, and then the shock of my daughter dying, and then the disorientation of not having this job that I had had for so long, not having my friends, not having the clients that I loved talking to, my health plummeted. And I just remember at some point I was thinking, I was laying flat on my back on the couch. I didn't have any energy. I was having all kinds of health problems. And I just remember thinking, you know, my computer and my phone need to recharge. You know, if you're using some kind of device, at some point, you're going to see a notification that says low battery. And if for some reason you're too busy to run into the next room and grab the cord and plug it in, you can still keep using the device for a while. But then what happens? Eventually, it dies. And even if you immediately go and get the cord and plug it in, depending on how much you worked that machine and what type of device it is, sometimes it even has to be plugged in for a few minutes before you can turn it on again, let alone even start using it again. And obviously humans are not machines. So why do we think that we can just keep going and going and going without stopping to regularly recharge? A friend of mine gave me this notebook several years ago. It says, if there's something you want done, ask a busy woman. And at the time I laughed about it, but now I've realized you can't pour out of an empty pitcher. So if we want to be the ones who are continuing to pour into the lives of those around us, and if we want to continue being the ones who get things done, we have to create a way to take regular breaks. And then even the values behind that, you know, we have to realize we are worthy of taking breaks, and it's okay for us to take breaks. And, you know, more important than that, life is unpredictable. So even if you're a phenomenal planner, you can't plan for everything. So that's why it's important to create a sustainable, practical system for recharging while we are still accomplishing our goals in the midst of uncertainty. So that's where I'm at now.
Just thank you for sharing. I mean, my goodness. How did you get through that? Like, what was that? I can't even imagine.
It was really, really hard. And honestly, my husband is just a gem. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know if I would still be here, because he was grieving just as much as I was, because I hadn't gotten to see our daughter the night she was born. He got to go down to the nursery and see her and hold her hand. And I think she imprinted on him. So she adored him. And anytime that I was there and he wasn't, she was always looking around for him, you know. And I was like, I'm your mom. Don't you love me too? You know, so he had such a hard time because he had really wanted a girl, and I had really wanted a girl, and it was a girl. And he was so excited about all the things he was going to do, like all the dreams for the future with her. So he had a really hard time, but it also was like the days that he was at his lowest, I was doing okay. So I was able to comfort him. And then the days that I was in a tailspin, he was able to be there for me. And one of the things that meant the most to me was he told me, Teresa, if you are ever crying in the middle of the night, if you're ever sad in the middle of the night, which she died at night and the body keeps score, you know, that is, nights have been horrible for me. But he said, if you're ever sad in the middle of the night, please wake me up, because I don't want you to be sad alone. And I was just like, you're just so wonderful. So I think it was because of him that, you know, it was like two wounded soldiers leaning on each other as they're trying to hobble up the road. And I think because of him, and we had some other family and friends who were helpful, but he was my main support. And he's been really good at just helping orient me to the truth, you know, speaking what is true instead of just all the, this is horrible, it's never going to be over, why did this happen? You know, more of the, yes, let's acknowledge the hard things, and let's also acknowledge the good.
Right. Right. You're one of the most optimistic people I know, like energetically, just, it's amazing to have you on the coach training EDU team and all the trainer calls and all of it. It's like your energy is always positive. How do you do that? Like, what's the secret sauce to working through that and being as, I don't know, vibrant? I mean, just, I don't know how to explain it, but how do you recover from that?
I think with grief, with loss, whoever you've lost, you know, whether it's a loss of a relationship or a loss of a person, I think in some ways you don't ever recover from it. You're working through it. You know, you get used to, okay, this is my new normal. It's the normal without this person in this space, but it feels like there's always still this big empty gaping hole. So like kind of like a scar eventually the wound heals, but you still have that scar forever.
Right.
I don't really have any advice, because I actually just said to my husband yesterday, if you knew me before we got married, I feel like I was always such a happy person. And people said, oh, I've never seen you frown. And I said, I feel like now I'm always just, I don't know, much more pessimistic, because I think I had not anticipated something this bad happening. And so it did rock my world. And now I feel like I'm much more realistic in terms of being aware that something else bad could happen. So in the months right after my daughter died, my biggest fear was that my husband was going to get hit by a car or something, because he was my support. And I was like, if you leave, I won't be able to do this. So I think what I'm trying to do is, it's so cliche, but treat every day like it's your last, to realize, okay, I'm going to hug my husband before he leaves for work, back when we were all leaving for work, but, hug him with the idea that I might not see him again, but I'm hoping I will, so trying to keep that in mind and not getting into, me holding grudges or being upset about petty things, to be like, with Teresa, we had no idea that was our last day with her. And it's kind of interesting when we think about how we spent that day, because obviously if we knew it was our last day, I don't know if we would have done something different. We watched a movie together, like the three of us, and we did just at home, but we just had this really relaxed day, cooked some meals for the week kind of thing. And we thought, well, I don't know, I mean, I guess that was a good place for her to be, to just have this warm, relaxed family day. And if we had known, we would not have been relaxed and engaged with her like that. We would have been fretting, oh dear, it's only 10 more minutes. So I think that was another thing too, is I'm so glad that no one knew that she had this chromosomal complication, and that none of us knew that her time was limited. I mean, your time is always limited, but we didn't know just how limited it was.
Yeah. How does coaching, or what aspects of coaching informed your process, or or the other way, how has your process informed your coaching?
I love the emphasis on learning and being. And I actually had someone pull me aside. This was probably 20 years ago. It was way before I knew about coaching. But she said, Teresa, you are such an achiever. But do you know, we are human beings. We're not human doings. And she challenged me to think about myself from that aspect. And I still have a hard time, because I do like the lists and I do like doing, but I think that's something, is I've become more aware of the being. Who do I want to be? And I love the future self tool of, let's look 10 years in the future. Who do I want to be? And then also, what does that say about my priorities? How can I get there sooner rather than later? So I guess one answer to your question would be, before I worked as much as I could because I loved what I was doing. And also at some point I realized I had never said no when someone asked me for help, because I want to help them. It makes me happy. You can guess my core motivation: helper. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So then at some point I realized I can't think of a single time that I ever said no. So I think it was during this time after Teresa died, when I was grieving. Obviously I couldn't do anything, and thankfully people were not asking me to do anything. But after that, for some reason, it has become so much easier to say no. And I've realized I can even say no, and then if I change my mind, I can say, actually, I decided to do it, and they'll be happy. So I think that's something else, is just realizing anything I say yes to is saying no to something else, whether it's more time with my family, rest, relaxation, recharging. It's okay to say no if I am prioritizing my life, so they'll find someone else to help them, and maybe that other person needed to be helping anyway, and I was just getting in the way.
I'm also struck with how our society doesn't have a robust way of handling little ones dying. Like, there's just not, it's very little support in this realm. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you see as gaps, or what do you wish was in place, or what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, that was something really hard because that was the biggest thing we felt like no one could understand us. And my husband is a biostatistician, so he does statistics and helps study design, statistic for medical research. So he looked up the statistics and he said, do you know in the US, only 4 out of every 1,000 children die before they're a year old? And, throughout history and throughout time around the world, the number was much higher than that. So I know in some cultures, they didn't even name the child until the child was 1 year old or 5 years old, because the childhood diseases and, just risks of the child dying were so much more common. And we just thought, if we lived in a time like that, maybe this wouldn't have been such a shock. I just felt like I had been so naive during the pregnancy. I didn't post the little pregnancy pictures, but a lot of times it's all just so happy and everything. And I think that was the hard thing. Now I have another child. He's 16 months old. And I had such a hard time during that pregnancy because I just kept thinking, what if something's wrong? Even if they don't know it now, they didn't know it with Teresa, it was just so, so hard. So I think that's the hard thing, is it's just not common anymore. And so, yeah, people don't know what to do about it. And I mean, in other countries, it is still much more common. So I don't know if there's some way to connect with people in other countries who are going through this.
Well, it just seems so rough, like from the hospital to the valet, like, like, wow, like it's very logistical, imagine if there was a coach there.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Just someone like, hey, like, I'm here to hold space.
Yeah. And I think at least for me, when I don't want to say was grieving, because it still hits me when I'm at completely unexpected times. But
Right.
when I was grieving more all the time, I think it was hard because I knew that everyone was trying to help, and it just, no matter how they said it, it just seemed like it wasn't helpful. So the people who have been most helpful were the people who said, talk, I want to hear. So it's exactly the coaching idea. Here, I'm here to create space for you. What would you like to process? What do you want to tell me? And just that level 2 listening, because I didn't want advice. And, anything anyone could say was not helpful because they had not gone through it and it felt like they couldn't relate. So I think one thing was just whoever would hold space and not talk and just let me talk, or let my husband talk. That was wonderful. We had some friends who invited us to their house maybe 6 months after Teresa died. And they literally said, when we walked in the door, they said, tell us about Teresa. And we said, can we show you pictures? Can we show you videos? And they said, yes, please. We talked, both of us talked nonstop the entire time we were there. And then as everything was winding down, we looked at our clocks and realized it had been 6 hours of us just talking nonstop. I mean, we needed that so badly.
Right.
So I think that's a huge thing that coaches can do for people who are grieving, whether it's racial injustice, like right now, COVID, whatever it is. I think us holding space and not giving advice is such a helpful thing.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of requests right now from everywhere, right? Participants, trainers, just society, it feels like, too, social media, to present guidelines to help people right now. Like, as a coach, how do you work with this? My initial response is space. I mean, that's all I know as a coach. Like, that's what I think at the core of coaching it's about. It's about creating space for people. I'm surprised how much emotion I'm at with now. Like, it's just, I think part of it is just being a father. Like, it's it's a lot. It's a lot, Teresa. I have a college roommate who lost a child as well. And we've talked about it. He says it never really leaves you. Like it's always there. We had a pretty big health scare too with our now 3-year-old when he was 7 days old. Similar kind of thing. And it's, oh, gosh, those hospitals and cousins, like it's just a lot. I feel like there's a lot here. I feel like I'm processing more than you. I feel like, you know, it's an odd sense.
It's hard too, because with the hospital, they see this. I mean, I don't know that they see children dying every day, depending on the hospital. Maybe they do, but you know, for them, it is a job. And I doubt anyone was trying to be mean, you know, but to them, it is more matter of fact. So I just loved, I've seen this video by Brene Brown on empathy, and I loved that she gave an example. It's this little animated illustration of these little, I can't remember, I think it was a bear and some kind of other animal were down in this hole. And then I think a gazelle is holding a sandwich, and she sticks her head in. She says, "Want a sandwich?" And it's just like, oh, that's not what I need. But what you need is the person to come sit with you in that space. So it's, yes, giving space, but also being there with the person. I'm here with you. I'm here for you. I hear you.
Wow. I mean, I can just imagine like talking for 6 hours, like the relief that you must have felt afterwards was like, it feels very similar on a much smaller scale, but people who when they first start getting coach trained, many of them have never had a coaching session, which is, I mean, it is what it is. But when they first get that their first coaching session, they realize what it's like to be listened to empathetically, like actively empathetically. It feels like people who are very thirsty, but didn't know they were thirsty. And they get a huge glass of water. Like, that's what I was been missing, this level of someone holding space for me just to process whatever needs to be processed. Like, I remember I still remember, you remember your first coaching session?
Yeah.
I was a guinea pig for Moise went through coaching first. So she went through the coaching. I initially thought that, you know, I was like, okay, life coaching, sure, let's do this. But then I was a guinea pig for people in her class. In my first session, I realized, what? This is amazing. I loved it. And it had an immediate positive impact. Immediate. But it feels like that. Like a lot of the participants, when they first get that first session, when they have that experience as a client of what it's like to be listened to. And to me, I think that's what, you know, that's at the core of Coach Training EDU's mission, is to help people experience that and the power of that. So where to from here, Teresa? We have any questions from, like, I have not looked at the clock. Okay, wow, we're at the 40-minute mark. That was quick. Of course. Right. So I have a couple standard questions I just want to ask, because I've asked everybody. When you first heard about life coaching, what was your honest first reaction?
I didn't. So I heard about life coaching because my friends were academic life coaches, but I didn't really know what life coaching was. So the only coach word I had association with was a sports coach. And, you know, you picture the big red angry face right in the players, the teammates' face. And I don't like confrontation. So I was just like, maybe I can be a gentle coach. And then when I started learning more about what coaching was, I love the 3 trusts: trust yourself, trust your intuition, your curiosity, you know, trust the client. The client isn't broken. I feel like the client knows the answers. The client is resilient and creative. But I feel like life is so crazy. We're going at such a frenetic pace. It's hard to think. And so coaching gives that space for the client to step out of the busyness, sit and think, process, figure out who they are, what they want to do, where they want to go. And then also for the coach to be that unbiased outside observer who doesn't know the situation. So we can pick up on patterns they're saying, limiting beliefs, mindsets, and then ask about those. How are these mindsets influencing these behaviors that they're taking? And how are those mindsets and behaviors influencing the outcomes? And then I also love systems, obviously, because yeah, I really love systems. So I love too that removes the value judgment from the person. If something's not working, it's not because you're a bad person. It's because there's something with the system. So let's start at the beginning. What's working with the system? Where's the part where we get tripped up? Okay, let's examine that. What if we took out this one piece and put in this other piece right there? What different outcome do we get? So I love that kind of, when I learned that's what coaching is, I thought, okay, I can be this kind of coach.
You do this, like,
yeah.
Let's rock in there. Yeah. I mean, so as a trainer, you consistently get rave reviews. Like people, I hear it a lot and it's lovely. Honestly, it's like, woo! What was the most surprising thing when you first started training other people to be coaches?
The most surprising thing to me was how the classes gelled together. I have a couple classes that just clicked, and it was so exciting to be a part of their group. I always loved coming in and seeing what they were up to. They were so excited about learning and excited about what they were sharing with each other what they were learning. And they were meeting with each other outside of class to practice. I mean, they're just so gelled as a group, to the point where even now, over a year after the class ended, they're still meeting as a group every few weeks. And so that surprised me the most is, this is different from any other training program, because yes, you're earning the skills and you're getting the credential, but you're also getting a cohort of people who are in this with you. Speaking of the Brene Brown, we're all in this together, down in the hole, listening to each other and not giving each other advice, but just listening and saying, how can we grow together? So that's what surprised me the most, is how close we could all become.
That was mine too. Very, very, yeah. But looking back, you're like, of course, because you're sharing intimately with, a group of 10, 12 people over a course of 6 months. Like, it's going to happen. Human beings, we are social. We yearn for these kind of connections. What advice would you give to a brand new coach, someone just starting their coach training?
I would say trust the process. So one of those 3 trusts, trust the process, because it is disorienting to be unlearning things that are strengths in your other field. And they are things you should absolutely continue doing in your other field. But in coaching, a lot of coaching is unlearning. We're not here to lecture at people. We're not here to give advice. We're here to create space for them and to listen on a deep level and to quiet our thoughts down and actually listen and not be thinking, what's my next question? But you've modeled this so well of creating space. Some of us have joked about, how can we channel our inner John? You'll ask a question and then you just stop and gaze out the window for a while. And it's so good because you challenged
me. Good on me for that too. I've had not so good feedback on that too.
You challenged me in my first class, the 1.0 class, to mute myself on my headset, like ask the question and then mute myself. And that has been a lifesaver, because I anticipate when people are almost done talking, and I used to just start talking, or, I'd guess where they were going and interrupt, which is so rude. And so since I started muting myself, it was so strange, because I would be muted and then they would stop and I would think, oh, they're probably done. I should ask a question now, but I'm going to take John's advice and count to 5 or count to 10 or 15 or whatever. So I'd start counting, and then inevitably I'd finish counting, unmute myself, gasp, getting ready to ask my question. And then the person would continue pondering. So I think what that means is, and I would go, oh, quick, mute myself again. They weren't done talking yet. They just need space to process. If we think about life is this frenetic, chaotic, crazy pace. We're trying to juggle so much and you have all the notifications everywhere. This is our space to just be quiet, be still, and let all of the chatter simmer down so we can see what's actually there. So yeah, that would be my advice, is trust the process and just lean into that space and lean into the listening. And when the person is finally done, processing, you will know, because they'll say, hello, hello, are you still there? You say, oh, I am. Okay, next.
Right. You know, you're pausing too long if they ask if you're still there. Like that's your, like, pause might be great. And, you know, like that's the litmus test.
It's safe
I
to talk
also,
now.
it's also interesting, like how, like something you said earlier about how in the aftermath of everything, each coaching session became like a refuge.
Mm.
And as a coach, I mean, when I was developing my practice and I was a high school teacher, you know, who found coaching, and Moise and I were like, you know, we were joking, we live on love and scholarship. Like we had no money, you know, we were month to month for years trying to make it. And we had a little one. I just remember the coaching sessions being like this island of peace, mental, emotional peace, where I could focus 100% on another person, and then deal with all the stressors of trying to, you know, establish a practice and make it, and all of those things. There's something healing, even as a coach, when you can hold that space for the other person. And that to me was surprising about what this coaching process, you know. What are your thoughts on that? And how do you see that playing a role in now?
When I got into coaching, I thought it was just a job. You know, you're a nurse, you're a teacher, you're a cashier, you're a coach, you know, it's all whatever. So I just thought this was this, you know, not even 9 to 5 job, you know, just this job with flexible hours. You decide when you want to coach. The company that I worked with, it was great because I didn't have to do marketing. I would literally tell them how many clients do I want, and then within the next couple of weeks, there, I have them all. It was wonderful. So yeah, it was, I thought it was just a job. And then, like you said, I'd get into night is a really hard time for me, the evening, because I'm so tired. I'm a morning person. So just to even have to do my coaching at night is a challenge. Now in hindsight, I realize this. So the fact that the coaching was energizing me, even though it was way past my usual bedtime, I just think that's amazing. So there is something so energy giving about holding space for people and watching their excitement and watching them experience breakthroughs. It's contagious.
It really is. I mean, I remember there were so many times when I would get off of, like, you know, be finished a coaching at, let's say, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And I would be rocking out on the drive, because I would meet with students at these coffee shops all over the city in Portland. And I'd be rocking out at 8 o'clock, like, let's go dance. Like, we got to go dancing. Like, you know, like I just got to do something. Yeah. Like with this energy. It's you get this feeling, like the feeling like I am doing what I was born to do. And there's something deeply, deeply fulfilling to feel that. And the most surprising thing for me is that felt fresh every session. Like you would think you would get used to it, but you don't. Like, Teresa, this has been a pleasure to like be here and hear your story. I mean, how the emotion, I was surprised at how much I felt it. And I've heard the story, but I haven't heard the story in that much detail, in that much, you know, the full version. And I know that's not even the full version, but we'll call it the inner, you know, the or longer version. How are you doing? How are you doing now with this conversation and everything?
I am so grateful that you invited me and you're holding the space for me to talk about it, because I love talking about my daughter. And now mostly a lot of the pain has passed and it's mostly fond memories. I think the hardest thing for me is, now that we have the little boy as well, is just, it's almost like next to him, it's almost like a split screen. You know, I see him on one screen and then I see just this gaping emptiness on the other screen. And so I had a really hard time with that the first probably at least 6 months when he was like the first 6 months, just because I kept thinking he seemed kind of like he was interactive and engaging, wildly different personality than her, wildly different sleep tendencies, which was frustrating. But it was just hard because I just thought, I feel like he would do so well with a big sister. You know, I think he would have been really excited about having someone paying attention to him. I mean, we were paying attention, but it's different to have someone closer to your age. So I think that was hard. And now, like I said, it's not that I'm over the grief, it's more that I am moving through it, and it's realizing this is how it is right now, and this is our new normal. And we have pictures of her on our wall, and he knows who she is. It's so cute because, you know, he points to pictures of her, and or we say her name and he points and he gets all excited and he comes up and waves. And so that, even a couple days ago, I just started crying because I thought, I just hate that she's only ever going to be a picture to him.
Right.
But you know, she is part of our life, but she's not part of our, I don't know how to say it, you know, she's part of our life, but also she's not here right now. Anyway, I don't know if that really answered. All that to say, thank you for letting me process through all this, because it's one of my favorite subjects.
Teresa, you're amazing. Like, it's such a gift for you to share this so openly. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you doing this and being a part of the Coach Training EDU community as a trainer. As I said, like, people love you and they tell us a lot. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for this podcast and for all of it.
It's an honor to be on your team. I love being on the team, and I'm glad people are finding the classes useful.
It's, yeah, I mean, we could go on. We have to stop.
Yeah.
We're almost at an hour. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Here, I know we didn't get to the questions, and there weren't many. So, which was, I think this might be our first podcast with no live questions, which is totally fine, totally cool. And thank you to all those who are listening to this podcast. This has been a Coaching to Flourish podcast with Coach Training EDU with Teresa Gallis, and I'm your host, John Andrew Williams. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.